So guilt is I've done something wrong, but shame is who I am is wrong. Who I am is wrong because of what I've done or what's been done to me. And so I must hide that in order to even show up in the world. I can't let people see that.
You're listening to the Redefining Wealth podcast with Patrice Washington. In today's episode, we sit down with life strategist, international speaker, and the coach's coach, Valorie Burton. She says it's time to let go of the guilt. Hey there, this is Patrice Washington from patricewashington.com, where we chase purpose, not money. Welcome back to another episode of Redefining Wealth. To all my OG listeners and purpose chasers, thank you so much for coming back week after week. Your ratings, your reviews, the way that you share in social media are such a blessing, and you are why this podcast continues to grow exponentially. And I just want you to know that I appreciate you so much. If you're brand new here, welcome to the family. Here's what you just stepped into. We are a community that believes that wealth is so much more than money and material possessions. We believe in the original 12th century definition, which says it's about the condition of well-being. So each and every week, I teach from the 6 pillars of wealth. The interviews, the guests that I invite, they're all about the 6 pillars of wealth, which are the truth behind what it means to build sustainable wealth, not just financial wealth, but in every area of our lives. I want you to get caught up. So go to patricewashington.com/start here and grab the free audio training, which breaks it all down. You'll see a link to it in the show notes. And I also want you to know that this episode is brought to you by my brand new book, Redefine Wealth for Yourself: How to Stop Chasing Money and Finally Live Your Life's Purpose. I am so excited about all of the lessons that are in this book that are going to help you build wealth from the inside out. You can find out more at redefinewealthforyourself.com. So I already touched on last week that this month is dedicated to letting it go. What is it? Whatever you need to let go in order to truly live your life's purpose and just walk in the freedom that you're called to. And I was so excited to get this woman for you. Do you see how I love y'all? Because you've seen her, I'm sure, like I've seen her in many, many places and spaces. And I just love how she makes things so relatable and easy to digest. Her work is incredible. And today we're talking about letting go of guilt. So let me introduce you to Valorie Burton. Valorie is a life strategist and international speaker. She's CEO of the Coaching and Positive Psychology Institute. Her life-changing message has an intriguing research-based emphasis in the pioneering field of applied positive psychology, the study of what happens when things go right with us. Her company provides coaching, coach training, and resilience training, and has served clients in all 50 states and 20 countries on 6 continents. Since 1999, Valorie has written 13 books, translated into multiple languages, including our topic for today, Let Go of the Guilt. You've seen her on The Today Show, CNN, Dr. Oz, Essence Magazine, and so many other media outlets and organizations have featured Valorie. She was named one of the top 60 motivational speakers in America and one of the top 100 thought leaders in the field of personal development. And she is our guest today. Without further ado, here's my conversation with Valorie Burton. Welcome to the Redefining Wealth podcast, Valorie.
Thank you, Patrice. It is so good to be with you.
Oh my gosh, it's so good to be with you. Now, do you remember that we met years ago?
Did we meet in Miami?
Yes. I think it's somewhere Florida.
Yeah.
Steve Harvey's event.
That's right. We both spoke there. Okay. See, I had this in my head, but I was like, was that Patrice? I don't want to say that was Patrice. It's like, who are you talking about? Yep. That was probably 5 or 6 years ago.
Yes, it was just that, about 5 or 6 years ago. And I mean, we met briefly. It was in passing, but I have to tell you the truth. I was really fangirling when I met you. I kept it in.
You did, because I had no idea.
I played it cool. No, but I mean, I would see your books in the airport, and I'm a nerd. So I was always in the bookstore. That was my inspiration for just getting into writing books, was just to sit in the bookstore. Yeah. And so I seen this pretty brown face on all these book covers. And then there you were, like, backstage, or however we ended up meeting. And it was backstage. And so, fast forward, I follow you on Instagram, and I still just think your work is amazing and incredible. And then I see this post, and I was like, this is my shot. You posted something, and I was like, oh my gosh. It was one of those where you just can't keep it to yourself. And so I don't know if you remember, but months ago I DM'd you, and this is the post I want to start with for this topic. You said that persistent feeling that you've never done enough, that you need to do better, that you need to do more. Even if you've never recognized it as such, it's guilt. Mm-hmm. It's the persistent feeling that you're not getting it right, and therefore you're doing something wrong. Guilt is a debt. It says you owe. So even when you have false guilt, meaning you feel like you've done something wrong, even though you haven't, you will overcompensate. You will punish yourself, and you will accept far less than you deserve just to pay the debt. As women, so many of us need to let go of false guilt and take back our joy. Mm. It stopped me in my tracks. You're just scrolling, mindlessly scrolling one day. And that stopped me in my tracks, because in my community, the women that I coach, I'm pretty much a business coach, right? And we always talk about this idea that one woman, Monique Coleman, said it on the podcast years ago, that she got from somewhere else and couldn't remember, but it was, your business will only grow to the extent that you're willing to heal. Yep. And the guilt that you spoke about, when I'm hearing my clients say they can't and they shouldn't, and, the imposter syndrome and the overworking, yet staying underpaid and all these things, I felt so strongly that we don't always have the words to pin it on guilt, but the way your book Let Go of Guilt shines a light on this. I was like, I need this on the podcast, because so many of us our decisions to do or not do things are being driven by this, and we don't even know. Yeah. And so take us to the moment that you made the connection between, guilt and how it plays a part in preventing us from truly living the lives that we desire.
Well, at first it was kind of more surface when I felt led to write on this topic. And I won't say, well, surface isn't really fair, but it wasn't as deep as what you just described. So it was guilt that I felt when I would travel for a speaking engagement and my son would be at home. And regardless of the fact that my son was at home with his dad and his two sisters, older sisters, my bonus daughters, I felt like I was doing something wrong. And when I began looking back on it, because I would describe that to my husband, who just didn't understand. And I did learn in the process of writing that there is a guilt gender gap. Men just don't feel, especially the false guilt, as often as women do. And some of it has to do with how we're wired, how we tend to be more empathetic. We are more other focused. So we're always thinking about our impact on everybody else. And so Jeff was like, why are you feeling guilty? Didn't you tell me that your vision when you were 20 and you were in grad school studying journalism, discovered you wanted to write books, that you wanted to have a business and be an author so that you could have a career and still have a family and have control over your schedule? Like, wasn't that the vision? Like, he reminded me of my vision, and I realized it took me more than twice the amount of time. Like, I was 20 when I had the vision. I was more than 40 when I was fully in the vision. And I'm feeling guilty about being in my own vision.
Ooh, I understand.
That was for me when I was like, I've got to figure this out. But I specifically remember taking a walk around my property, because like I've told you earlier, we live on a ranch, and I'm just walking and pondering guilt. And I was like, I have this feeling all the time, this anxiety, like I'm doing something wrong. What is this? And I really began to pray about it. Like, God, what what is this? And what I realize is what you just described, that we're not getting it right, that we're not doing enough, that we should be doing more. And that's what I wanted to deal with, because that wasn't God speaking to me. That was my own issues. And so I had to get clear, number one, about what is enough. So that when I hit enough, I could be like, you hit enough, you can relax.
Valorie, can I tell you my word for 2021 is contentment? My word is contentment, because if you're not careful, you can achieve and amass and have all this stuff and then still feel like there's not enough and you're doing something wrong. Yes. It's like, at what point is it okay? Are you okay?
Because guilt is what we feel when we think we've done something wrong, right? So authentic guilt is I've actually done something wrong. I need to apologize, atone, try to make up for it. But false guilt isn't that you've done something wrong. It's just that you feel like you've done something wrong. If you don't question it, then you will behave as though you're guilty. And guilt is a message. It's either you've done something wrong or you feel like it. And like you mentioned, guilt is a debt. It says you owe, you need to pay up, you need to make up for whatever it is you've done wrong. So if you're telling yourself, I haven't done enough, when you actually have, and then you begin blaming yourself and beating yourself up because, well, if you just worked a little bit harder, well, if you just reached out a bit more, if you just, and you fill in the blank of what that is, then even though you're doing right things, even though you're giving your all, you're still walking around feeling guilty. And that's where your joy gets stolen. So we have to be self-reflective and notice where this is coming from. The issue isn't just the guilt. This isn't just about feeling better. The issue is guilt tries to hijack your decisions. And so you're running around overcompensating, trying to pay people back for things you don't need to pay them or compensate them for. And that's where we need to really be paying attention, because we can get ourselves into a whole lot of trouble saying yes to things we should say no to, etc., because we're feeling guilty even though we aren't.
And I want to really be clear for the audience how this looks like how this is manifested. And there's this bullet point list that you gave that I thought was so great. It looks like, as you said, overcompensating. It looks like obligating yourself in some way to things that you probably should say no to, but you say yes. Excusing otherwise inexcusable behavior or attitudes. Quote unquote, making it up to someone for a perceived problem, right? Or accepting unfair treatment as deserved and acceptable. And you gave such a great illustration at the open of the book about how this kind of plays out. It was the morning your son asked to have his breakfast at the table. I would love for you to share that story, because I think that so many of us can see ourselves in those moments.
So Alex, I used to eat full breakfast. Like I still do. I can't start my day without my breakfast. So, but my son's not that way. None of our kids are that way. And we had gotten to the point where I would just put Cheerios in a bag and a cup of milk, and he could do it in the car because it was just exhausting. And deep down, I kind of felt bad about this because that's just not what my mother ever would have done. So on this particular morning, but he was happy with it. I want to make that really clear. He was like, oh, finally, she's not fussing about me not eating. So this particular morning, we were a little bit ahead of time, which means like 5 minutes. Okay. Not anything major. And it's time to go. And he says, Mommy, I want to eat breakfast at the table. Can we eat breakfast at the table? And I, without even thinking about it, it's all this guilt. Poor kid has to get up so early in the morning. I have to take him to this bus stop. It's only 7 a.m. He's 5 years old. It's still dark outside. All he wants is to eat breakfast at the table with me. And I'm about to tell him, no, you're going to eat some cereal in the car. I mean, these thoughts,
all the things,
2.5 seconds, all of these thoughts, right? So he's asking the question. He's sitting there with that little face waiting for an answer. And I'm like, sure, pumpkin, but you got to eat fast, right? You know what happens next. So he's taking his time. I'm like, Alex, hurry up, eat. we get in the car, we're running late, and I'm like holding the steering wheel like tight. You know how that goes. And we turn the corner, and I can see that the bus is starting to pull away. And I literally hit the curb. Like I hit the curb. I heard this boom. And I'm like, well, I got to keep going because his school's across town. So if he missed the bus, I had to drive pretty far to get to the school. I hear the tire like flopping against the asphalt. I'm driving about 10 miles an hour. The bus driver does see my car. He recognizes me. He stops. I get Alex out of the car, get him on the bus. I go park in a space thinking, okay, how am I getting to the office now? Because I had busted 2 tires and I could feel that my SUV was like leaning to the side a little bit. And the whole reason that I went through that was because in my head, I literally had a flashback when he asked. My flashback was to me being a kid and my mom every morning, grits, eggs, bacon, toast, orange juice. And it wasn't like, a meal she got out of, the freezer aisle. This was, she got a pot out, made the grits, scrambled the eggs, put the bacon in the oven. Okay. Not the microwave. And that's what I'm thinking. What kind of mom are you? Think about how your mom made your breakfast. You never ate breakfast in the car. In fact, your mom only fed you cereal once. And then I realized my mom fed me cereal once when I was in like 3rd grade. And I thought it was a snack. I made her.
And you still asked her for breakfast.
Where's my breakfast? So the thing is, when we start making decisions out of guilt, like that morning, I could have just said, no, Alex, we can do that tomorrow. But instead, I felt this false sense of guilt and felt like I had to compensate. Let me try to let him do this really, really fast. And at the end of the day, what did I do? $800 worth of damage to my car.
Yeah, hours spent waiting, I'm sure, for tow trucks and people to come. Yeah. Several hours wasted.
Uber to take me to the office, and then later in the day, take me back to meet the tow truck. And, but think about the ways that we do it that are more significant than that. I have coached women who won't ask for what they're worth when it comes to their income because, well, I'm very blessed to have this job. Nobody else in my family makes this kind of money. Or they're thinking, this is a small business. Maybe I'm being selfish. Not I'm adding value that is increasing the business. So there are so many ways in relationships that it shows up. People making relationship decisions and commitments.
I love the story that you tell in the book about a past client who turned down that proposal and then circle back and the gentleman comes back in her life and out of guilt, out of feeling like, well, I can't hurt his feelings twice. Right. She goes into a marriage that was not for her.
Yeah. She felt basically that if she was going to give the relationship a try a second time, that she was obligated if he asked again. Because it wouldn't be fair to try again and say no again. I mean, we often don't talk out loud about the thoughts that we're really having and the real motives behind why we do what we do. We're so afraid to have hard conversations that we just stuff it and then we make decisions that we know are not healthy for us, may not even be what we feel God leading us to do. And then we ultimately end up paying the consequences later.
Yeah. And I love that you talk about the idea that, we do these things sometimes like we're thinking of what other people might be thinking, right? Like we're making up a whole scenario about, I don't want them to feel this, or I don't want them to feel that. And as I was reading your story about Alex, I was thinking about the time that Michelle Obama was on her tour for Becoming, and she was coming to California. She did the Great Western Forum, or they probably changed the name by now, but the forum. And there was this window of time that I would have to go pick my daughter up from school and then still try to get from South Pasadena, which you may know Southern Cal a little bit, Rose Bowl all the way to Inglewood near the airport, which on a normal day is 40, 45 minutes, but with traffic and with an event, sold out event like hers, you can imagine.
Yeah.
And because my mom was not able to come to things like my basketball game or practice because she worked so far away, I had this unspoken guilt that I put on myself about, I became an entrepreneur so that I could be flexible and be at all the things. And so it was a nightmare, like getting to her in the opposite direction and then getting there and when she saw, how stressed I was, like I created all this unnecessary stress. There was traffic, there was everything. She made a comment like, I really didn't have to go to that. Like she was like 10 or 11. She was like, she was so clear that I had created a story that was unnecessary. She's like, Mom, I really don't know why you like put all this pressure on yourself. Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And in that moment, I was like, I'm living in a story from 1991.
Yep.
About what I would do, how I would behave as a mother, all these things. And I'm creating this guilt. And my daughter is like, girl, chill out. Like you put this on yourself. This was not a requirement. She was like, Mom, you really didn't even have to come to that. It wasn't a big deal. Oh my gosh.
Right. And you put yourself through all of those changes trying to make it happen. So that's what I'm talking about, particularly as women. We're always thinking about our impact on everybody around us, our kids, our significant other, our friends. And it's something we have to notice so we can free ourselves from it, because the stress isn't worth it. And the stories we tell ourselves are often just completely inaccurate. It could be for you, well, if I don't make it to everything, I'm a bad mom. I don't really care about my daughter. I'm not really giving well, that's not actually true. And so we have to stop. I give this whole process in the book about peeling back the layers. We have to push back against the thoughts that we're having that are sabotaging us. Is that true? Right? So, is it true? Mom guilt is very real. Is that true that I'm a bad mom if, and you fill in the blank? I found with single moms in particular, and I think it happens with single parents in general, oftentimes overcompensating because of the feeling that our child is being deprived of having both parents. And so maybe I'm going to let some things slide I wouldn't otherwise, or maybe I'm going to overcompensate with the gifts or whatever it is, even though I realize I might be creating a bigger problem by not holding them accountable. This is something that's come up over and over again, particularly as I'm talking with women who are trying to do it alone. So the mom guilt's a part of it, but the women, just the women guilt. There's even research that shows that women feel guilty for working after regular business hours, whether they are married or not, whether they have children or not. Men don't feel any guilt about that.
At all.
I'm working. That's all there is to it. I'm working. There's no guilt about working. And so to think that a 25-year-old single woman with no kids can feel guilty about working, and the 45-year-old mom with 2 kids can feel guilty about having to work extra. And you put that in the middle of everything that we're going through globally right now and all the changes. And if your kids are virtual and you're trying to work from home and how that all looks, I think there's additional guilt right now. And then when you look at, you may have older relatives that are isolated and you can't go check on them. You can't see them. If you've had anybody in the hospital due to COVID or anything else right now, you can't go see them. There's just an extra level, I think, of guilt. And if you're struggling financially at all and you can't do the things you were doing before, especially as it relates to the impact on people you care about.
Yeah.
Guilt. So there is so much going on right now where I think guilt just shows up, where we have to notice it and we have to push back against it.
Well, and I love the illustration you gave about how guilt can follow you throughout the day. Like from the time you hit snooze on the alarm clock, it starts to tug at you. Man, I feel guilty that I didn't wake up. Like, oh man, I started my day behind.
I had a plan. That's not what it does me. I shared those thoughts in the book. Like, You were supposed to get up. You're starting guilty. I haven't done enough. Already, you haven't even gotten out of the bed. So for me, I have worked very hard on self-compassion, on treating myself the way I treat the people I care about when they're going through the things I've gone through. I don't beat them up. I don't try to make them feel guilty. If they need extra rest, I'm like, you've been doing a lot lately. You do need some rest. Like yesterday, literally, I got done with my last appointment. It was only about, it was 2:30 because I pretty much finished working at 2:30. My son gets out of school less than an hour after that. I felt so tired, Patrice. I walked up the stairs. I went to my husband's office. I said, I don't know why I'm so tired, but I am so tired. He said, you want me to go pick up Alex? I said, yes. Now, the old me, no, that's okay, because I had already planned and he hadn't planned. I said, yes, thank you. And I went upstairs and I got in the bed and I took a 2 hour. I was like, whew, self-compassion.
Self-compassion. I call it just showing yourself grace, right? The same grace you might extend to other people. And the way that we get into this beat up mode about what I didn't do, what I could have done, what I should have done, and literally take that through the day. My friends and I are always saying, oh, I got to get it together, right? Because it's usually in reference to something that slipped your mind or what you forgot to do, or why is this still not done? And there's that constant conversation that I used to think was funny, right? Like, girl, we need to pull it together. I need to pull it together. It's just something funny. But then when you really look at that deeply, it's like, it really underscores that idea. You're never enough. You're never done. You never get it right.
And that you don't have it together. Yeah. So you're not doing something right. And I really believe most of the time we're doing the best that we can with where we are in that moment. And being able to forgive ourselves even when we don't, or even when we feel like that best isn't enough. We showed up. The bigger question is, how do you want to show up today? How do you want to show up right now in this moment with all that you have in front of you? And looking back 5 or 10 years from now, looking back at this season that we are all in, what will you wish you had done? Whatever your answer to that, do that. Because even in the midst of the biggest challenges, there's opportunity. And the most successful people look for the opportunity in the challenge. While everybody else is complaining about it.
Yeah.
It's just a mindset shift.
So let's get into spirituality and guilt. Because that's huge, right? Like there's that sense of, I don't know if it's probably conviction, right? Your religious beliefs or practices may come with some guiding posts, some rules, some some things that you want to honor. And sometimes it makes sense, to your point, to recognize the authentic guilt. Like if you wrong someone, you probably should apologize. Like you should make amends. You should work through that. But how do we confuse authentic versus this, what do you call it? False guilt. I was going to say fake guilt. And I was like, I know fake is not the word. I know it wasn't fake. But, a lot of people feel guilty because they just feel like they're not getting it right when it comes to their spirituality or how that ties in. How do you make that distinction for folks in the book?
Well, first of all, I believe God gave us this inner guidance that tells us when we're guilty. There is a point to guilt. It's not just there to torture us, right? It helps us do the right thing. And in fact, one of the most intriguing pieces of research I discovered when I was working on the book is around conscientiousness and the fact that those who are more conscientious are more successful, but they also tend to be more guilt prone because they have a clear set of guidelines about how things ought to be done. And they don't feel good when they aren't able to live up to those rules and standards. So there is an upside to guilt. You don't want to be in a relationship with someone who never feels guilty.
Right?
So guilt-prone people are actually far more loyal. They're concerned about your needs. So if you feel guilty, I don't want you to feel guilty about feeling guilty. Okay, there's a good thing. God placed it there for a reason. And yet, and I'm just speaking from a biblical standpoint, there's something God wants us to do, but we also have this enemy. We also have somebody that's always planting seeds of doubt. And guilt is a good way to do it. How can I steal her joy? Oh, I know. Help her feel badly about whatever it is. So, number one, I think we have to remember that God is forgiving. He's a God of grace. He knows we're not perfect. And the sooner that we accept our own imperfections and we do so with humility, the easier it is for us to give ourselves grace. I really believe that it's not just that we are required to forgive others. We're required to forgive ourselves. That's, to me, the most spiritual element of this, because again, guilt says you have a debt you owe.
Mm-hmm.
And so God could forgive you, and the person you wronged could forgive you, and you could say, I still owe. So I'm going to keep beating myself up. I'm not going to speak up about that. I'm going to allow behavior that I shouldn't allow because I did X 5 years ago, 5 months ago, 5 days ago, whatever it happens to be. So at some point, we have to be willing to forgive ourselves. But I really believe that requires some humility, because really what we're saying is I'm supposed to be perfect.
Yeah. And I see how this robs people of their purpose.
Yeah. So if you are humble enough to accept that you are imperfect, that you mess up, that you don't always know the answers, that sometimes you say stuff in a way that you shouldn't have said it, and you're willing to work on it. That doesn't mean you just keep doing the same thing over and over again, right? But forgiving yourself, I think, is a huge piece of the puzzle. And it can be a hard one, especially in the big things that happen in life, right? Maybe it's some way that you failed as a parent. Maybe it was a divorce. Maybe you really screwed up and got fired. I mean, any number of things that can happen. Maybe you didn't treat your body so well, and now you're dealing with some health consequences. In order to move forward, you still have to be willing to forgive yourself and then say, okay, what do I want to do from here? How do I want to show up now? And what wisdom can I gain from my past behavior that I intend to change as I move forward? And I'm not going to be able to change it perfectly, but I know I need to make some changes. I mean, just that level of grace, I think, allows you to breathe.
Yeah. And for many of us, it allows us to take some of the, like you said, the mistakes or the challenges of life and repurpose them, like use those things as tools to not only keep you going, but for people like us in our space of, educating others or transformation, it's really, I'm teaching from my mistakes. Like, had I not made the mistakes that I've made or had the experiences that I've had, I wouldn't even have the compassion that I do for people.
Oh my gosh, that is so spot on. Like what feels like my biggest failures made me more compassionate, made me feel other people's pain more. And I think made me more real. Like, those things will humble you. But I think that's necessary, because when we come from that place, if you're teaching, then you can also be transparent. It allows you to connect with people more deeply because you're not trying to hide something, right? You're like, yep, that didn't go very well. That wasn't a very good decision, but here's what I learned from it.
Yes.
And you can learn something from yours too, right? Doesn't make you a bad person, doesn't make you dumb, doesn't make you fill in the blank of whatever you've been beating yourself up with. It's just life. And
Just life.
it's just life. And what do you want to learn so you can go ahead and move forward and fully accept and embrace your story?
We talk about that all the time because a lot of times we hide the story because we're afraid that it will be weaponized.
Yes. Yes, we're afraid of that, but I think we're also afraid of not being seen in the light we want to be seen.
We're committed to
the image, who we want to be, or who we think we have to be in order to be acceptable. And when we're hiding, I mean, I think that's a really important word because, guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is a step further. It's who I am is wrong. And therefore I must hide it from you.
Ooh, say that again. Say that again.
Yeah, so guilt is I've done something wrong, but shame is who I am is wrong. And who I am is wrong because of what I've done or what's been done to me. And so I must hide that in order to even show up in the world. I can't let people see that. Shame is very, very toxic. And when we shine a light on it, when we shine a light on those things that we feel like can't see the light of day, it literally just releases the power of that. Now it feels very vulnerable, obviously, but that's a necessary part of the process. Like, Patrice, I know you do this really great work with money. This was huge for me. And I've not written a lot about money. I intersperse it in some of my books, but I feel really strongly about it. I think there's a lot that we do around money that is done out of guilt, but a lot of that also comes from shame, right? And trying to hide where we are, who we are by covering things up, by trying to spend our way or make, I was an emotional spender. A lot of people are emotional eaters. You can see the emotional eating. Emotional spending is like celebrated really because now it looks like you're more successful, right? You're buying things that look like success, but you're at the same time hiding that maybe you can't really afford those very things. I mean, it's really, really deep. And for me, when I looked a step further to why I was accepting less than what I deserved, why I was unwilling to step up, I could trace it back and look at where did these feelings come from? Mm-hmm. And by starting to peel back those layers, it's not that you have to know why. You don't have to know why you do all the things you do that don't work for you in order to change them. You can just decide this isn't working. So despite my fear, despite whatever I'm feeling, I'm going to do what I know is the right thing for me to do. I'm going to open my mouth and ask for more. I'm going to set boundaries. I mean, all of these things, even with the guilt, when you begin operating from a place of joy and of peace and of truth and not guilt, even though you might still feel guilty, you'll begin seeing the kind of outcomes that you want.
That's the key, is making a choice, right? To not operate from guilt. Right. Even if you feel guilty, or, with other folks who have been on the podcast, it's not operating in fear. It's, I'm going to be bold and courageous, even though I'm going to take this step forward, even though my teeth are chattering and my knees are knocking.
Yes. And whoever that is in your life that is really good at guilt trips, you're going to learn to flip the guilt trip.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that. That was in my notes. Wait a minute, because I know that there's someone listening who's like, that's everything that you've said has been awesome. Thank you so much. But it's not always the internal conversation. I'm around people who, quote unquote, make me feel guilty. Is it that we're allowing other people to make us feel guilty, or are we just feeding into whatever conversations they're having?
That's exactly what happens. No one can make you feel guilty unless they find a vulnerable spot they can tap into that you deep down might agree with, even if just a little bit, right? And so what you have to do is whatever that little thing is, maybe it's the mother who makes you feel guilty about, whatever it is. And you're like, well, maybe I am a bad daughter, or maybe it's the spouse or your child, right? Or a friend. I mean, people who are guilt trippers are very good at finding the people who are guilt prone.
That's good.
Yeah. So they can see, ooh, I see that spot. I can kind of strike. It's really important to notice, what am I agreeing with here? Is it true? That is one of the most important questions you can ask. Is it true? If it's not true, then it's false guilt.
Oh.
And oftentimes, these are hard conversations. You have to ask yourself, am I willing to just have a hard conversation? It doesn't have to be that hard. You could even write down what you need to say. And sometimes, because look, people can't guilt trip you unless they're close to you, because you have to care about people in order to change your behavior because they're making you feel guilty, right? So, so the random neighbor that you don't know can't guilt you into doing something, but somebody close to you can guilt you in that way. Sometimes it's a matter of saying, I feel really badly about this. I wish I could do this, right? Or I don't want to do something out of feeling guilty because it's going to make me feel resentful, and I don't want that in our relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of times it's being really honest. And so asking for something different is essential. And you might not get it right away. Sometimes you have to repeat conversations a couple of times before people understand that you're serious, but it also means that you have to stand firm in what you say you're going to do or not do.
Yeah, you have to enforce your own boundaries.
That's right.
Not just set them, but enforce them.
But know that it's possible. And the most important thing you can do is shine a light on the truth. Right?
When all else fails, get to the truth.
Yeah, let's talk about the truth, because I feel like you're implying that, right? That somehow I don't care about you unless I buy you this. Right? Or if I don't pay for X, Y, or Z. I mean, I'm thinking about, for example, adult children. There are so many parents who will feel guilty because, maybe they're not going to be able to have X, Y, or Z. Well, maybe that's a part of the learning process.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
right?
Maybe they need to learn to strive to make that happen for themselves. Like there's something.
And you'll help them with that, right?
Yeah.
But at some point, they've got to be weaned off of, I remember the book years ago, The Millionaire Next Door, and they kept talking about economic outpatient care, right? Parents that keep paying for stuff. The kids are 40-something years old.
Talking about, that's my baby.
Right.
Yeah, I've counseled people like that. Oh, but that's my baby. Your baby is 39 and a half with 3 kids. Like, they're a full-blown adult, and they need to. Sometimes to help people, we have to stop helping.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm not talking about, emergencies that are
right,
unique and aren't happening all the time. I'm talking about, this has become a burden to you. This is really enabling them to not fulfill their own potential. And so this is loving in a different kind of way. In a way that helps them get to where they need to go. But if that guilt trip persists, you might find yourself doing things that don't even line up with your values.
Right. I want to be a cheerful giver at all times. I want to do things from a place of true desire, excitement, contentment. I want to do it because I want to. I don't mind giving, but I don't like takers. I don't mind being a giver, but there's some people who, as you say, they can be prone to guilt tripping. And it took me some time to build that muscle just to learn how to say no without all the additional conversation. Like, should I have said yes? But they did help me back in 92. Like, they did drive me to school, which is what a lot of athletes feel, that financial guilt once they professional athletes. Well, that person used to come to every game when I was in middle school and high school. Now, sir, they're asking you for a house. Right.
So then you have to ask, do I want to repay them for their impact in my life? And what does that look like?
For me.
Yes. And you decide what that looks like from your perspective. What do you want to do or not do? And do that only.
Mm-hmm.
We interviewed about 500 or 600 women when I was writing the book. We surveyed. And a theme that came up over and over had to do with women who had achieved a level of success, but they were the first in their families or one of the only in their families to be where they are. And that guilt of feeling like they've left loved ones behind, or that they are the go-to person and they can't get ahead on their own goals because they're constantly bailing somebody out, or there is this expectation. And one of the things sometimes you have to do is reset expectations, because you cannot achieve your goals when others are putting expectations on you that you receive that really aren't your expectations. Again, this isn't about, I'm not going to be generous, but it's about deciding, what can I do? What do I feel led to do? And then that's it. That came up so much, and it breaks my heart, because I think for a lot of women, African Americans, people of color in general, this is a theme as we get to higher heights and more people are able to achieve their dreams, but may want to even pull others along with them, but some may want to be pulled along and some may not. And so how do you deal with that dynamic? Because it's sad when you've worked so hard to get somewhere and now you're feeling guilty, and that somehow you've done something wrong.
Yeah.
And you haven't. You have not. I do believe that we want to be generous and we want to help others learn what we've learned, right?
Yeah.
If there are those people in your life that they're wanting to move ahead, but the expectation that somehow you owe just because you've worked hard is toxic. And so being able to address that, I think it feels sticky, but I just want you to understand that you must set the expectations. You can't let everybody else set expectations that you must then live up to. And if you don't, somehow you're wrong. Somehow you're not doing things right. Be prayerful, be generous, be kind, be loving. But that doesn't mean that you need to be a pushover, that you need to be guilt-tripped into doing things that you can't afford to do, or that don't align with what you believe God's leading you to do.
Oh, so good. That was a great mic drop. That was a great mic drop, because I know so many women in my community needed to hear all of that, and they need to read Let Go of Guilt. So we're definitely going to be linking to that in the show notes. Before I let you go, Valorie, I want to ask you what we call our rapid redefining wealth, our rapid wisdom questions here on Redefining Wealth. You're just going to tell us the first thing that comes to mind. Okay.
I'll do my best.
How do you define
my overthinking hat? Okay.
How do you define success?
Oh, that's easy. In Successful Women Think Differently, and all the books that go with that kind of successful women theme, I say that success is a harmony of purpose, resilience, and joy. You need to know what you're here for. You need to be ready when the setbacks and the difficulties happen. And there is no success without joy. Don't allow anything to steal your joy. The amazing thing is that joy is strength. Research even shows it. Happiness is a success strategy. People that are happier are more successful, not the other way around. So don't pursue success to be happy. Pursue happiness and success will follow.
Oh my gosh, I love that. I love that so much. How do you define wealth in 3 words or less?
Patrice, 3 words or less. Freedom, generosity, and peace.
I love it. What's one book that has helped you redefine wealth?
Oh, it was a book called Secrets of Six-Figure Women. It's by Barbara Stanley.
Now Houston, Barbara Stanley. She was just on the podcast.
Yeah, I read that.
I love that book too.
Oh yeah, I doubled my income in 6 months and tripled it within 2 years. That helped me with the not asking for what I was worth. Yeah.
I love it. We're going to link to Barbara's book as well, you guys. Love Barbara. Okay, this is the last one. It's a fill in the blank. My name is, and to me, the truth about wealth is.
My name is Valorie Burton, and to me, the truth about wealth is that you can have it if you're willing to learn what it takes to have it and undo your bad habits. That was not very eloquent, but that's what I've done.
It's true. Yeah.
Consistency. It is consistency, not just with your investing and saving, but consistency of noticing what you're doing that sabotages your ability to have wealth. It is possible, but you've got to be willing to think differently, do things differently, say no to some things, say yes to some things, and take some risks, some calculated, wise risks in your life that other people might not be willing to take.
Amen. Thank you so much, Valorie. This was so good. Oh my gosh, did I not tell you that this conversation would be amazing? From the moment I saw that Instagram post, I knew that we needed to hear from Valorie. And I just want to say, as she said, let's not feel guilty about the guilt, right? So if you know that so much of this episode was at your doorstep, right? Like you can identify with so many of the examples. And man, when you get the book, Let Go of Guilt, trust me, it doesn't matter how much work you've done on yourself, how much personal development, you're going to read stories that remind you of you in different seasons of your life. And we get to, as Valorie says, reset expectations. The ones that we've seen, the ones that we've set, and those that have just kind of been unspoken, but yet we let the guilt override us day after day. We get to reset expectations. So today is about letting go of guilt. And it's not an overnight thing, right? We can only recondition what we first recognize. And one of the things that Valorie talks about in the book, which is why I want you to pick up a copy, is the guilt list. And I didn't get a chance to tell her, but man, doing the exercises in the book have been so therapeutic for me. I want you to do them with me. Let's talk about it in our Facebook group, in the Redefining Wealth Facebook community. Let's talk about it so we can just put it out there, right? And then move forward, move past it, remove the guilt, the embarrassment, the shame. Like, let's just say what it is and move past it. We got to name it. Please get a copy of Let Go of Guilt. So good. And also, I wanted to share with you that Valorie has a membership program. It's called the Successful Women's Academy. And it's about closing the gap between where you are and where you really want to be. And this is for those of you who have this intense desire, right, for personal development. So all the professional things you are so good at pursuing and going after, but you forget that personal growth is required in order to really make those big dreams come true and to stop sabotaging your joy and to stop being held back from being your best self because of fears or habits or distractions. I'm going to link to it in the bio because I really believe that there are so many of you in my community who need this. And I know that she's a woman of integrity. And so you know how I am. Whenever I see someone doing something that I think can be a blessing to you, I'm going to talk about it. And Successful Women's Academy by Valorie Burton, I think can be a really great complement to what we do and talk about here. So go check it out. Hopefully doors are open. If not, join the wait list or get on her email list so you know when doors are open again. All right. That's it for me. Next week, we're going to be talking about what else we need to let go of in the Let It Go series. I can't wait for that. Until then, I want you to go live your life's purpose, find fulfillment, and earn more without ever chasing money. Talk to you later.